Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you take advantage of opportunities. This week's guest is Amanda Amaeshi, who is an award winning activist, campaigner, and writer specializing in gender equality, anti racism, and youth voice and political participation. We recorded this episode before Amanda was finished with her course, but she also recently graduated from University College London. It was great to talk with Amanda, so without further ado, let's get started with this episode featuring Amanda Amaeshi.
Hi, my name is Amanda Amaeshi. I'm a award-winning campaigner and activist specializing in gender equality, anti-racism, youth work, youth voice in politics, all that kind of stuff. And currently, my main things are I'm a final year law student at UCL, University College London, and I'm also a council member on the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls in Scotland. So I've been in that role for almost 3 years now.
That was a great intro. I'm super excited to talk with you. Can you tell me a little bit about what got you started with this work? Take me back to the beginning of when you first got started. What inspired you to get involved in social action in general, and then just kind of bring me up to the present?
I think as a child, I was always that kind of kid where I'd hear about something that I didn't think was right or something that I felt was unfair. And I was always wanting to be like, why is it like that? Why is it like that? Like, how can it be different? And a lot of the time, the response I'd get is like, oh, that's just how the way things are. Like, can't really do that much. It's not great, but we can't really do that much about it. And I always just thought, well, what's the point? Why do we have to accept something's not great if it could be better? I think I was quite lucky that from a young age I kind of just came across opportunities which kind of aligned with me. At first, I saw an opportunity on Young Scots website. So Young Scot is just a national youth charity for anyone in Scotland. They have lots of information, resources, opportunities and stuff. And saw the opportunity to be a Year of Young People ambassador for 2018. So in Scotland that year, every year there's a themed year, 2018 for young people. And so I just kind of applied for that. I didn't really know what was going to come out of it, but it was really cool. I got to speak to politicians and go to events and just showcase what young people are doing, and talk about why youth work is important, why young people in politics is important, and celebrating young people's achievements. So I was in that role for just over a year, and I met lots of really cool people as well, and I was really inspired to do more to try and make a difference. And then I'm a girl guiding member. I was in guides from 10 to 14, and I then found out about Girl Guiding's advocate panel. So it's a group of girl guiding members between the ages of 14 and 25, I think. They get to come together and kind of speak out on behalf of girls and young women about the stuff that's important to our lives. So again, I applied for that. Didn't really know what it was going to be like, and it was such an amazing experience. Again, getting to speak to politicians, decision makers, is stuff that I never expected I'd be doing at 15, 16, speaking at party conferences or at International Women's Days events in London. And yeah, just being able to raise my voice and stuff that I thought was really important, like education and period poverty and ending violence against women and girls, amongst lots of other things. Even though COVID obviously happened in the middle of that, it did change the way we worked, but it was still really good to be able to continue doing stuff over lockdowns, even though it was online, and still keeping that sense of community and during a really difficult time.
I think that is such a great start, and I think the opportunities that you had, I love how you just kind of kept going with them. And I feel like you just kept doing more and getting new opportunities. And I think that's great for people to hear. Can you tell me about this current role and the work that you're doing for the advisory count? Is it the advisory council or the advisory group? I want to make sure I get the right title.
Advisory Council.
Advisory council,
Yeah, I
perfect.
feel the full name is a bit
Yes.
of a
Okay, I was gonna
mouthful
say, yeah.
sometimes,
It's
but
tell me about that work. It sounds amazing.
now I'm going to get the name confused as well. The First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. And maybe I'll give a bit of background to like how it's because I wasn't in it from the start. So like I'll give a background of like how it started and then where my involvement like fits into that. So like basically the council was set up in 2017 and the aim of the council was to give recommendations for the First Minister and the Scottish government on how to make Scotland a more gender equal place. And every year between 2017 and 2020, the council like came up with like lots of recommendations and all the recommendations were accepted by the Scottish government. Some of them accepted in principle because of like limitations to do with like devolution and like other like lots of technical stuff, but at least in principle, all the recommendations were accepted. Like, woo, that's great news. But because it's one thing for recommendations to be accepted, and then another thing for those recommendations to actually translate into action, to translate for like positive outcomes, there's now a second phase of the council, and the council is like scrutinizing what the government is doing and holding them to account. And then how I get involved in this. So on the first phase of the council, like there were some young people on the council, including like a representative from Girl Guiding Scotland. And as part of like the second phase, they wanted to continue to make sure that there was like that youth representation on the council to make sure that the work that the council is doing is useful for girls and young women as well as like women of like all other ages. So I as like I was just about finishing my time with Girl Guiding Advocate. I'd also done like a bunch of like spokesperson stuff for Girl Guiding Scotland as well. So yeah, like they approached me and they asked like if I wanted the role. And yeah.
That's amazing. So tell me about some of the opportunities that you've had in that role, or maybe some of the decisions that you've made or that you've contributed. I think that that's just so exciting to hear that you really are giving this feedback to the First Minister. I think it's such a great opportunity. Tell me a little bit more about what that role's like for you now that you're in it.
So obviously like quite a few recommendations were made and it would be too much to like try and like let's see how we're doing like all of them at the same time, especially because like some of them they'll take just like naturally like just like the nature of the recommendation it takes like a little bit of time to like actually implement. But so we're currently in, let me count actually. We're the third round of our scrutiny. So like we've had like the first and second one already. And in each time, like we've picked like different recommendations. And then we basically just like, we've been asking like questions to like government ministers and like through writing, but then also we've had in-person accountability events as well. I mean, it's quite fun, like just being able to like ask a question and then just kind of like because it's kind of like changing that like power like balance because it's not normally the case, at least like well, for me, especially as a young person, but I guess for like most people, like it's not every day that you get to like speak to like a government minister or like a senior civil servant and then actually ask them about like what they're doing and like how it's impacting everybody else. So just being able to like ask them and really like get down to the nitty-gritty of like why are you doing this? How are you doing this? How are you making sure that the needs of like women and girls, and especially those from like marginalized backgrounds, how are you making sure that they're like centered to that work? Yeah, and I've gotten to meet the First Minister as well. I mean, the First Minister's changed a couple of times since we started phase two, but yeah, I've gotten to meet like First Ministers, which is really cool.
That is really cool. That just sounds like an amazing opportunity. As far as your degree that you're doing, can you tell me about what inspired you to get started with that and what you're maybe hoping to do in the future with that degree? I think it fits very well, it sounds like, with the work that you're doing. Feels like a very natural fit, but can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I guess what like in terms of like what I wanted to do is like a degree in like future career, like kind of like similar to like why I'd started doing the social action stuff. It was always about like I want to be able to help people and like activism like is really important and like kind of like advocating for like policy change. But then I thought that like without kind of like the legal background and like the legal like kind of like backing, that the policy kind of just like it doesn't lead to anything. So I really wanted to learn more about how like the systems actually work and how it can be used like for better or for worse to like shape outcomes. And so yeah, like that's why I decided to study law. And I remember like writing my personal statement like I want to change well maybe not like that exactly, but like I want to change the world, like I want to like try and help people. And I'm in my third and final year, so it was a bit difficult at first, like kind of like adjusting to like legal academia and like the way that they write and like the way that you're expected to think. But like once I got my head around it, it's been such a valuable degree. It's really broadened my horizons, like how I see the world and how I like view things. And I've really gotten to learn more about how the law can and sometimes like isn't helpful.
That's so interesting. And I think that idea of doing activism, but then also having this deeper understanding of the way that the law works and how you can actually reform that. I think that's so important. What's the best advice that you've ever gotten as you've been doing this work? I'm sure that you've made some amazing connections with people. Like you said, you met the first minister. I'm sure that you've been in contact with so many other amazing people. What is some of the best advice or maybe the words of wisdom that have kind of stuck with you as you've been doing this work? You've been doing it for a while too. It's amazing. You've worked with
Yeah.
lots of organizations. So, is there anything like that that comes to mind for you?
I think just that always remembering like change is possible. Although like change can be slow or it might not come in like quite in the way that you might want. But it's just trying to like not like putting rose-colored glasses on like, oh, everything is fine. It's kind of like acknowledging like that's like the reality of things, but trying to stay optimistic that things can and will get better. Because if you kind of just give into that like defeatism of like, oh, like what's the point? Well, that's how like all the like negative things in the world that we want to like stop, like that's how they keep going. And then the other thing as well is I say like the other like major advice would be to do with maybe it's like really cliche but about having like that self kind of self-belief or self-confidence because it's really easy to say it was much harder to like put into practice. Especially like well now like being on the advisory council, I guess I started it when I was 17, I'm 20 now, and it's not exactly like a common role for like young people to have like such like level of like I mean, not necessarily power. Like, I can't go and like change all the laws in Scotland, for example, but it's quite like a lot of influence, and especially like the other people that I'm on the council with, like their CEOs, their professors, like they're like trailblazers in like their specific like area, like with gender equality, and especially when I was first on the council, like it was quite easy for me to feel like intimidated, not because of the fault of anyone else. Everyone's really lovely, but just like that voice of imposter syndrome will creep in and be like, oh, like you shouldn't be here, you don't know enough. And yeah, it's just trying to like it's learning to kind of like acknowledge the voice, but then be like, no, okay, like you've been selected to be here for a reason. Like you have so much like useful things you can offer, and nobody knows everything. Like regardless of your age, regardless of like how many years experience you have, there's always stuff to be learning, and there's always stuff that you can teach as well. So it's just like trying to go in with like an open like mindset.
I love that. I think that's such great advice to carry with you. And I'm going to ask you for a little bit more advice in the next question. This is my last question for you. But lots of young people want to create change and do this work that you're doing, get involved in social action in different ways, but they might not know how to get started. What advice would you want to share with those people who may be listening?
I think something that's quite important to do at first is like to identify like the key interests or like key goals because it can be quite easy like, you want to change everything and I guess ideally if we could like if it's just like a click of a finger you could change everything that would be great but you can't do that like you're only one person so it's like trying to think about like what's something that you really want to change like if it's something that you've been thinking about for a while maybe you have some kind of like personal connection or you've seen it happen in like your local area and just like think about that and then do a bit of research into like what's already happening to like kind of like tackle this issues and engage with like the works of like people who are like on the ground like doing the work especially those who have like lived experience of the issue or like different perspectives of the issue as well yeah and then it's just about like trying to like reach out finding those opportunities or creating those opportunities if they don't exist and not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to ask for help. Yeah.
It was wonderful to talk with Amanda, and I love how much we covered throughout our conversation. I think it's amazing how Amanda has managed to find so many opportunities and make so many connections, particularly in the social action world. So, I want you to take away all of Amanda's advice from our conversation and remember that change comes when you take advantage of opportunities. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Amanda on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be the Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be the Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.